Anyway, today we welcome Professor Lynn Harter of Communication Studies and the co-director of the Barbara Geralds Institute for Storytelling and Social Impact. She will tell us how the Institute fosters collaborative storytelling and advances narrative scholarship to catalyze collective action. Sounds like a basis for a social media group. So please welcome Lynn Harter.
Thank you so much. Just a housekeeping item. Kevin, if you can hear me, I think we're getting some music feed. Thank you.
I'm going to be really honest as I start this. I shared with a couple of people that Roxanne contacted me in the summer, and Summerlin was feeling really alive and really fresh, and said, yes, I would be happy to participate in this conversation, and committed Fallin to doing that. And a couple of weeks ago, Fallin was like, what were you thinking? Because a couple of weeks ago, I left my voice in Houston, where I was commemorating the life of Barbara Geralds, who donated the endowment that created the Storytelling Institute. And I haven't fully got it back yet, so I am here and I am honored to be here. I'm excited to facilitate this conversation. I hope that as our hour together goes on, that you feel comfortable raising your hand, interrupting me. There are going to be times when I invite you into that conversation, but I've most certainly allowed space for us to talk at the end about our collective shared experiences. But in storytelling fashion, I would like to start this evening with a narrative encounter. So I invite you to step into this image. And my question for you is, what do you see? What do you see? And what makes you say that? And I'm not sure we really need a mic. And she's offering t-shirts, but I think there's free coffee slips left as well.
Surgery?
Surgery, who said that? Okay. What makes you say that?
It looks like an instrument and fingers holding it.
Okay.
And everything like covered up all around it.
All right. It is. This photo was snapped in the middle of a surgical procedure. What type of surgical procedure do you think was unfolding when this photo was snapped?
Looks like a chest operation. So somewhere, I imagine like probably a heart operation, like a cardiac surgery.
Okay, and what is your name?
Will.
Will. And so what makes you think a chest and what makes you think cardiac?
Well, just kind of given from the angle, it looks almost as if the picture was kind of taken observing someone's chest.
Okay.
And I think I kind of see what looks to be like some sort of bones, like ribs, like possibly trying to penetrate the ribs to get into the heart.
Okay. So you're paying attention to the standpoint of the storyteller, like from where that's being narrated, right? Where that photo is being taken. Does anybody see anything else? Yeah, Megan.
For some reason I saw kind of like a furnace and something really hot, but I see surgery now at the beginning.
Okay, so initially you thought furnace, heat, right? I appreciate your imagination, right? Alas, it is a surgical procedure, and this is the chest of a young woman that's opened up. It's not a cardiac surgery. This is actually her lung that a member of the surgical team is holding. I share this with you with permission of then 16-year-old Caitlin Shoup, who shared it with me. She was diagnosed with osteosarcoma which is a really rare form of cancer, typically presents itself in the form of a tumor at the end of a femur. And in fact, that's where osteosarcoma started for her. But her team of specialists were concerned that a mass that they saw on a CAT scan was indicative that that cancer had metastasized. So they were telling her, we want to do a transthoracic aspiration needle biopsy to determine whether or not that osteosarcoma has in fact metastasized. And as a 16-year-old, she said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I have no idea what you're doing to my body. And so I'm gonna read you her words. This is from Caitlin. I wanted to know what was going on in my body. The doctor was telling me, but I couldn't see it. I couldn't visualize it. Oftentimes they take photos for medical reasons, so I just asked him to take my camera into surgeries, and he did. He always had one of his medical students, that was their job for the day, to take pictures for me. I learned a lot about my body. Like this picture here, I thought it was cool at first because I didn't know what a lung looked like. I thought it looked like a tongue. But the opening is so huge. I couldn't believe they could do that. Unbelievable. The transformation of Caitlin's body through this process of narration became not only seeable, but sayable. Right? As she exercised the agency to enter into what oftentimes patients experience as narrative surrender, where the experts who have technological and scientific knowledge that guides that process, kind of their language takes over. And in this process, her and her family stepped back and said, wait a second, we need to understand this. So not only did they have photos taken during that experience, but Caitlin and her mother proceeded to scrapbook the cancer experience. So you'll see here that image of her chest wall opened, right, as someone's looking down and taking the photo, is situated within a broader page where both Caitlin and her mom are integrating fragments of that narrative experience, some written word, some text that describes it, but also the hospital bracelet, right, from that particular procedure. I want to share with you words from Caitlin's mom about why scrapbooking the cancer experience was important to her and her family. So now these are the words of Tricia, Caitlin's mom. I've been scrapbooking a long time, so anything of significance in our family deserves its own book, be it a prom or a birth of a baby, a wedding. Each of my kids have scrapbooks from birth to present day. In terms of scrapbooking our cancer experience, initially, I just had to preserve everything. I had to preserve every second and every nuance in case she wasn't here anymore. I had to. I just had to. But as it went on and she fought harder and got stronger, then it became a book of her victory. When I wrote a letter on the back, I said I was just proud of her, and I thanked her for letting me go on the journey with her, because I learned so much from her humility to humor. Normally, you don't learn those things from your children, and she taught me all of those things. So it came from preserving her life into her victory. I'll share a couple more images of that narrative artifact that's co-constructed by the family, and that's now part of our shared experience because each of you are entering from your own place. Some of you may have been through a cancer journey or have a family member who's gone through that. Right? This is an example from a surgery where they had to decide if they were going to do a limb salvage surgery, right, or amputate her leg because an infection had developed where they had initially done a knee replacement. Again, she's taking photos. Her and her mom are narrating what's going on. And alongside that are images that you would typically expect, right, in someone's scrapbook from their high school experience. For me, I share this with you because on a regular basis, I am humbled by the human capacity to face what Kenneth Burke called trouble with a capital T, profound disruption in our life. And for 20 years, since I first stepped foot on these bricks, my fundamental question that's been a companion that I've carried with me in various spaces has been, how do we live well? How do we thrive in the midst of perceived difficulties or inescapable suffering and trauma? How do we thrive? What are the symbolic and material resources that allow us, right, to flourish? Storytelling remains a primary symbolic resource that I come back to time and again. Certainly not the only resource, but I would argue a fundamentally important one. When Caitlin's family was faced with the life disruption of osteosarcoma, they had to re-plot her life, right? The future that she envisioned was no longer possible. And the process of narration, the process of, right, endowing disruptions with meaning by connecting characters in relationships across time and space, often in ways that imply motive and causation. That process of implotment and its capacity to reveal how things change over time, that's at the heart of its capacity as a symbolic sense-making device. Caitlin and her family, others who entered, journalists who interviewed her, researchers who she allowed to be a part of her life, right, to understand and ultimately co-narrate bits and pieces of that experience, all of them entered in from a narrative place to make sense of expectations gone awry and to imagine otherwise. And it's both of those. It's a capacity to make sense of the past and connect it with the future that makes narrative so powerful in understanding character and societal transformation. For me, and I am drawing on a recent book that I co-edited with a dear scholar, Dr. Brittany Peterson, and there's 35 authors who've joined in this book, including many colleagues from Ohio University, across colleges, and people from across the nation. In this book, what we're really bringing into focus and what's been at the heart of what I've done for 20 years is looking at how storytelling is central to the construction of the process of brave space making. Right? The process by which we enter into that risky, tension-filled place of vulnerability where we're able to undo in order to become, where we can build capacity, where we can engage the perspectives of people who are different than we are, and we can imagine, enlarge our sense of what's possible. Certainly there are material forces that are necessary for space making of that nature. But deep transformation in our society, I argue, and my colleagues argue, is not possible if there are not also symbolic narrative transformations that support that. Let me give you a different example. So this is the cover of the book, and this was an image that Roxanne shared on the postcard that was shared with all of you to invite you to come to this conversation. Has anybody seen this image before? Besides Patty Mitchell. It's called A Story of Flying, and it's a collaborative piece of art. And it is probably my favorite piece of fine art that has evolved from the Passionworks studio in Athens, Ohio. Has many contributors, like all of their art does. One of the key artists, her name is Alexis Reinhardt. And she, along with other artists from the studio, collaborated with Tibetan monks from South India who were here, and they were doing prayer flags. And one of the things that, as an artist, she's really passionate about is Smokey Robinson. So she tells a lot of stories about Smokey Robinson, right? Meeting him, being at his concerts. When I was invited into Alexis's house, her bedroom is called the Smokatorium. And there's stories of Smokey that are on the wall, that are on the dresser, on the floor, right? It's everywhere. It's her passion, right? It's part of her muse. And prior to being an artist at the studio, she had an individual service plan where part of the goal was to prevent her from being obsessively having that compulsion to talk about Smokey Robinson. So that passion was seen as a deficit. It was seen as something that needed to be fixed. And in fact, well-intended care providers had as part of their plan to redirect her and to shift her. Part of the beauty that is Passionworks Studio. Okay, so how many of you know about Passionworks Studio? All right, right? And if you don't, this is an invitation to lean in and learn more, not just now, but in the future. When Alexis came to the studio, Patty Mitchell, the founder, and the other artists were like, you are passionate about Smokey Robinson. Let's make Smokey art. And since that time, it's become her signature. Right? So the back of this, what was a prayer flag, is a story about Smokey Robinson. And although I didn't bring it and I didn't think to integrate it into the slideshow, I was really proud of our publisher because they took a little line where she says, I'm writing a story about Smokey Robinson, and it's on every single page of the book. Right? Layered with her story is the art, right, from the monks who were visiting and the art of other folks from the studio. I included that in this invitation, and I included it on the cover of our book. We commissioned it. We paid for that because she's an artist and she deserves that. Her work is worthy of it. Because for me, it's not just a story about Alexis and her collaboration with other artists across the borders of nations and states, across different religious traditions, across different languages. It represents deep narrative transformation. Right? It moves between the autobiographical story and the stories of a culture. We tend to view disability from a deficit perspective. And at the studio, what I argue that they do is they offer a counter narrative. They challenge that, where they understand difference, right? That there are developmental differences among us. And we need to create built environments in which those can be honored, right? And let's do that through art, right? So a studio becomes a brave space in which we can challenge, we can unsettle those dominant narrative frames that too often position some people as less than. And all of us in the process benefit. All of us experience more joy as a result of that. So at the Storytelling Institute, we are interested in the individual stories, but how those are connected with the broader stories that guide how we organize resources, that guide public policy. And we want to elevate stories that have the capacity to challenge those broader societal stories that limit human potential, right? Or privilege some people at the expense of others. So, what do we do? How do we do that? I have a 10-minute clip that I want to share with you, and it introduces you to 3 brave spaces that have been a part of our journey over the past. The Institute has been, it was conceived in 2015. We, of course, have been doing this work much longer than that, but this illustrates the duration of what we've been involved with. So, Jack, I'm hoping that our work ahead of time pays off.
You want to tell me what to draw to? You have an idea?
An elephant?
An elephant? I love elephants. Okay.
One of the things that I'm amazed by in making art in a hospital setting is the level of buoyancy in people's spirits, a reverence and a celebration wrapped into one. And I think that comes from your life being on the edge, and that in many, many cases, getting to that edge is life-affirming rather than life-threatening.
You know, art can be a dusty thing on a shelf, and it can be a vibrant, live thing in a community. It basically allows for all of what we already have to bubble up and come together and diffuse into something that we can have a shared experience around and to see evidence of each other's beauty.
I'll use any color you want.
Here's paint.
Okay. Pink cowboy hat to match your pants?
It's a pink cowboy girl.
Cowgirl hat. I keep saying cowboy, but that's just because that's what I'm used to.
You just gotta say cowgirl,
Okay,
not
now
cowboy.
I'm gonna try this time.
To work in the arts and healthcare context is a unique point of view on how to help patients. The thing that grants us such a unique perspective is that we have an opportunity to connect with the patients around what's meaningful to them, not around their immediate medical needs.
A child can become engrossed in his work or her work, even when they're extremely uncomfortable, and can focus their attention on what they're doing, tune out their physical discomfort, and that really is something that's fascinating to watch.
Green, Mommy, you think you like green? Here's green for you,
Green would look
Mama.
nice. Okay. All right.
I believe that the art motivates her. She's had a couple of surgeries and has done extensive chemo and radiation. She's just been here, just lying in bed. Didn't want to get up, sick, throwing up. But as soon as the doors open and Ian walks in,
Big 10-gallon hat.
it's all over. And then when I come back, it's like there was never anything wrong.
Yeah, maybe you could help pull the tree down so that the elephant could eat it.
The elephants don't eat trees.
What? They don't eat
They
leaves?
eat peanuts.
They eat peanuts? Oh, okay.
Giraffes eat leaves.
Giraffes eat leaves. You're right. You're right.
The Arts and Medicine program at MD Anderson is a powerful reminder to all of us that there is a very human side to the story of medicine and medical science.
The potential for imagination to explode in the room. There's certain potential for imagination to transform reality in a hospital room. And I think that's it's more powerful than you might think.
But I wish I was a catfish swimming in the deep blue sea. I'd have all the pretty women here swimming after me, yeah.
It's just such a gift. I feel like Santa Claus. I go to a room, I put my fist up to knock, I I knocked 4 times, and I just think, oh my goodness, I have something gorgeous to give you.
It's a part of your day, it could be the only part of your day that somebody's not asking for, waking you up or wanting to take your blood or making you walk when you don't feel like it, or I'm not asking anything from them. So I think it's part of their day they might want to remember.
Let me see who I am. God bless you.
Did I hug you? You won't let me, or did you let me?
You have to be able to say, hey, here is somebody who is really sick, they're in pain. And then you walk into their room. Now, that's the challenge. How are you going to even wheel this person in so that they can, have a conversation with you? Yeah, good. Okay, good. You're a good man. Can you get ready?
We need to remember, we need to take into account that we're dealing with complex, spirited, vigorous, vital human beings. We're not dealing with just somebody laying in a bed that we have to deal with a series of inputs on various measuring mechanisms and then base a decision on. We're dealing with souls, spirits, and humans, and that's part of what the art is there to remind us about as well.
You actually drum me up. Yeah. You are a very good drummer, man. You're a very, very good drummer.
I'm really attracted to hanging out with people who are perceived as having developmental disabilities. I like to make big, giant art projects. So I want to combine those two things. I am completely addicted to creating the scenarios where people are supported, invited to feel all of these levels of risk, vulnerability, identify courage, and then do it.
Oops. Come here, please.
You know, and once you present people with different types of opportunities, and particularly creative opportunities, then their whole world begins to change.
I also see the impact that it has within the change of culture in creating creative spaces within places where it was never considered before.
In my mind, it's time to look at other things for people to do that will engage different parts of who they are. And they're just so open and so ready and so interested and curious, about what's out there and what's possible, that they'll just jump right in.
That's the first time I ever painted in my life. This is the first time I painted.
Courage and creativity are very connected in that they both require a leap into the unknown. In that way also, I think there's a relationship between courage, creativity, and faith. You are accepting that there's things that you don't know. You are accepting that there are things that you will never know. You're accepting that there's things that you will not be able to define, and you're accepting that you are not the only hand holding the paintbrush.
Here you go.
That pen? All right.
Right here.
You want to be standing on the elephant's head?
No! Right
On its back. That's what I was guessing.
That's the struggle that I celebrate with people, because it translates into other areas of life. And just offering the opportunities for people to come forward and just manipulate materials, right? And then it's like, oh, I can. And so that struggle of penetrating that first barrier can get you into the land of plenty. because we are so powerful. We are so powerful inside here.
I mean, I definitely don't want the conversation to end, you know what I mean? I feel that it's just kind of getting good.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Kevin. So that was a 10-minute condensed version of a series of feature-length documentaries that we distributed through PBS. And you get a little bit of each of them, right? And all of them I share because I think it represents the core of our belief system at the Barbara Geralds Institute for Storytelling and Social Impact. I will note that this institute came to be in part after we screened one of those 3 documentaries, A Beautiful Remedy, and we were screening it at the Museum of Modern Art in Houston, and with then President McDavis, that's Barbara, that's Ian, and the president of MD Anderson Cancer Center was there. It was magical. And after that, I had just ended a 2-year term as the Barbara Geralds Schoonover Professor of Health Communication. And Barbara said, okay, Lynn, so you're moving out of that professorship. What do you want to do next? Right? If you had these resources, what would you do? And I said, I would create a storytelling institute so that we could take what we were doing and increase the scope and include more faculty and include more students. And she donated $1 million to endow the institute, and since that time had been a part of the journey. Actually loved being in the field with students and I when we were entering into the settings in which people live their lives and the settings in which they were sharing parts of their experiences that they were willing to share with us. And she was there not to guide us, but just to experience it and to see the wonder in students' eyes as they were learning by doing. Right? So I want to introduce you to the core group of people who are a part of the Institute. Tom Hodson, who is now a Emeriti co-director, was by my side when we founded this and remains a key partner in what we do. Patty Mitchell. Patty is here. Please stand up. Patty, rock star. She's a community fellow and has an office in Scripps Hall. And earlier today we were on the phone and we were commenting on how we've worked together during the entire 20 years I've been in Athens. And in many ways we've grown up together. And it's an honor to walk by your side and to continue to learn and grow with you. And I continue to be inspired by you. Joe Bianco, Dr. Joe Bianco is an associate professor in the Department of Social Medicine at the Osteopathic College, and he could not be here today, but his parents are here. Joe shares a deep affinity with us in terms of fundamentally believing that how we come to know the world and navigate through the world and make choices and develop relationships and ultimately maybe foster change comes in and through narrative logics. You'll see Megan Westervelt. Megan is here, and she's one of the newest members of our team, our new videographer. Megan, welcome. Jorge, I think Jorge is here. He had to leave. One of our graduate students who's joined our team, and Chuck Kaminsky, who's another doctoral student. So together, we help to lead these efforts. And we're guided by a few core commitments. Our fundamental goal is to elevate and to amplify the voices and the stories of people who oftentimes are on the margins, or their voices haven't been heard, right? Or even their voices have been discounted. Right? So creating and holding space, not to speak for them, but creating space so that they can share their experiences, and we get to be a part of that process. We want to shift dominant narratives that limit human potential. A across all three of these documentaries, what I would talk to our medical students about is how in our culture, we are so guided by this dominant narrative of technology as progress. Right? And we benefit in so many ways from that narrative. But it's also a limited one if that's the only way that you can think about how we care for another in the midst of suffering. And so in each of these cases, you see individuals and groups trying to just unsettle that a little and trying to challenge. And in the midst of, right, the epitome of what we would call the biomedical model, where we have science and technology at its best, right, at the #1 ranked hospital for cancer treatment in the US, give or take in a year, you have people pausing and saying, wait a second, right? This is not just about a fist-sized tumor at the end of a femur. This is about a life story that's been disrupted. And we need to pay attention to the whole experience. We need to integrate the family. We can do that courageously in diverse ways. So they're trying to enlarge the way that we think about care. When we talk about that at the osteopathic college, we talk about how medicine is typically identified as a science, and it is. But if you shift that, you can think about the practice of medicine as a science using interpretive craft. So if we move from medicine as a science to medicine is a science using interpretive craft, that shift in how we talk about what it is that people do when we care allows us to acknowledge that fundamentally you have to move between a biomedical script, a story, a diagnosis, what you know about it, and the particularities of a lived story. We understand certain things about diabetes, right? Different types, how those present, how we care for them, but that's always situated in the life circumstances of a family and an individual. And really good care providers understand how to move between those stories, right? They understand how to leverage the biomedical expertise, but in the context of a broader patient's life story. That's an interpretive craft, right? That's brave space making in a culture where we tend to revere science and technology for all that it benefits us. But sometimes we hold science in one hand and technology in the other, and we don't have hands left to hold, at the end of the day, what's most important. So for us, we want to unsettle just a little some of those dominant narratives that we take for granted that both enable and constrain us, and enlarge just a bit possibilities, and hopefully model ways to thrive, right? And to be joyful in doing so. Right? I don't know if I can go back. Part of our vision for the world, and I wish Joe were here to really live this. Am I out of time? Okay. We imagine a world that is both just and joyful through storytelling. We want to understand, acknowledge, pursue the role of storytelling in disrupting inequities, but we want to do that in a joyous way, in an appreciative way.
Lynn, I have a question online for you.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Your person online would like to know what is the significance of the flowers that they are holding.
Whoever asked that question, thank you. This is the official flower of Athens. It's a flower that is made of upcycled materials. Specifically, at Passionworks Studio, they take printing plates from the Athens Messenger that might otherwise end up in a landfill, and they give those printing plates a second life. So it's moving from a linear economy to a circular one, where you might have something, you introduce it, has a life, and then it's done. Instead, they use their imagination and say, how can we keep this in, right, our cycle? How can it have another life? It has another life as a flower. It became the flower of Athens. It's three-dimensional. It is made by our artists at Passionworks Studio, and these flowers are gold because gold represents the color that signifies childhood cancer in our culture. And this is a project that the Institute is really committed to. We want to shift the broader narrative of cancer survivorship. We have a documentary called Realistically Ever After that talks about the long-term late effects of treatment. And we want to move from happily ever after, right, you're no evidence of disease, we've conquered it, to that's just not the case. And those represent all the lives that are impacted by childhood cancer. We use those to give visual evidence to the mission of a nonprofit that is at the heart of that. And you can get them online, passionworks.org.
I was about to say, another person just chimed in and said, wonderful Christmas presents, holiday presents, passionworks.org.
Passionworks.org. Now, had I been more tech savvy, I would have integrated like a QR code or something next time, right? Next time people can help me. Thank you so much for those questions. So I'm going to just tell you briefly about some other stuff so I can open it up and we can talk about your narrative experiences and questions that you might have. I wanted you to know that we do a variety of narrative-inspired activities. We have a podcast. Tom Hodson is the executive producer of a series of podcasts. I'm highlighting one that Dr. Joe Bianco and I co-host and co-produce. And one of the unique things about this podcast is that it's done in partnership with an academic journal in our discipline, health communication. So each of the episodes, we have authors, right, join us, and they're talking about their core research programs, whether that's about telemedicine or it's about environmental determinants of health. Right? We create and hold space for them to translate that and to communicate with a broader public, right, in a way that's understandable. Right? Oftentimes our work can be so esoteric that it's rendered almost impotent to people who don't understand the language and the research techniques. And so this is a podcast that allows scholars engaged in really incredibly important work to interact with the public. So it's one of a few podcasts that we sponsor. Our work's available for streaming on Amazon. Joe is one of the core leaders, and I'm a facilitator of the Open Book Project at the Osteopathic College. The narrative that I started with today is part of our curriculum, and it's part of an experience where we invite medical students who are learning about transthoracic needle aspiration biopsies. They're learning the techniques of that, and also in the context of a life that's lived in which that matters. And so the purpose of that narrative medicine elective curriculum is to encourage that perspective taking, deep listening, the capacity to bear witness to the circumstances shared by another so that you can care in a way that's responsive to that. And this was the group of facilitators our very first year. We're entering, I think, our 4th year of that curriculum. And last but not least, for 20 years, a core part of who I am has been connected to Passionworks Studio. And I can't imagine that it wouldn't be. So along the way, we've had lots of folly and fun, but serious fun, right? And while people look at it and might think that it's magic, and I will let you know that right before this started, Roxanne said, I think I want to be in the parade next year that we just had. We've been a part of partnerships with the Athens Humane Society and Basset Buddy Rescue, where we're trying to flip the narrative of rescue dogs as dangerous, right, and not suitable for families. So how do we shift towards you can't change a dog's past, but you can rewrite its future, right? working on a mural right now on the back of Dirty Dogs car wash. Get it, dogs, dogs. And we're going to have some of those PSAs that we've created that are a part of that broader story. This past year, we did a mural at Larry's Doghouse, where many of our core artists went to this iconic wall, and they had a research trip. They tasted the ice cream. They drew at Larry's, and then for 2 months in the studio, right, it kind of reflected on that experience. It inspired their art. And ultimately, that was layered with the art of a young man who had been through cancer treatment. And we unveiled that last November, right, to a crowd that was eclectic as Athens itself, right? And our artists get to see their images, their expressions on an iconic wall that represents who we are. This is this past weekend. Again, part of where my voice remains. Loved this image from Patty John. Yes, an amazing image, right? You get, with permission, right, from Joel Prince, a sneak peek at what's going to be the 2023 Visitor's Guide to Athens, Ohio. And this is a picture that was snapped this past weekend. Right? And what I love about it is that it captures the spirit of Athens. All of the costumes are made of upcycled materials. Over a month-long period, we had what I consider to be a think tank where all of our first-year students come to Honey for the Heart. They get to play with materials. They get to envision how you can turn something into something else and not let it go to waste. Be whimsical, connect with this place, this region that is Athens, right? And to do so alongside community members. And for us, that's not just about the joy of creativity and stepping outside yourself, right, in a costume. It's also about a narrative of Halloween in Athens that tends to be pretty reductive, right? About the naughty nurse outfits after hours, right? The mayhem. So Honey for the Heart has expanded that narrative, right? Not just to the after-hour part, but how can we have this month-long experience where people come together, right, from all different backgrounds, in the spirit of seeing and savoring joy, right, and spectacle. Was it 10 minutes? 10 minutes, okay. So this is Chuck Kaminsky, who is Master of Ceremonies, and in the background you see a banner from Sugarbush Foundation. We are now working with Sugarbush Foundation to help them as they think about the work that they do. They fund campus community partnerships, and at the heart of all of those partnerships, what I'm working with them on is arguing that not only are they helping to, for example, reclaim acid mine drainage that has littered our waterways and killed off, right, habitat and is a result of the extractive industries of the past. Not only are they changing the environment, right, they're flipping the narrative of waste in our culture, right? Because now that acid mine drainage, right, that's culled out, that iron ore, through the work of people in the Russ College of Engineering and the College of Fine Arts, with support from Rural Action and Sugarbush, they're turning that into an asset. They're turning that into a product, paint pigment, but it can be other products. Iron ore, which we typically import a lot from China, it's included in makeup, lots of different products, right, that need that iron ore. So our goal is to work with them to think about the narrative nature of change involved with the projects that they're doing. So with that in mind, and because there's only 10 minutes, I will say thank you to Barbara Geralds, resting in peace, who fundamentally believed in the power of knowing through storytelling and has helped to make all this possible. And I'm excited to hear about your narrative experiences or questions that you might have or reflections that you'd like to share. What is your name?
My name's Hailey.
Hailey.
Okay. I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more about the importance of art in creating and spreading narratives.
So, the title of this presentation, The Poetics and Political Nature of Storytelling, reflects two fundamental beliefs that I hold about storytelling of all sorts. I believe that narrating is a poetic act or a creative act. Kenneth Burke, one of my favorite philosophers, in his book Permanence and Change, he argued, though the materials of experience are established, we are poetic in our rearrangement of them, right? So narratives circulate in our surround, and they're our friends, and sometimes they're healthy friends, and sometimes they're destructive, right? So the poetic potential of storytelling means that those symbolic resources in the surround, we can reimagine those, right? If we get stuck in a story that we tell about ourselves where we tend to position ourselves as a victim, if you think about storytelling artistically, we can step outside of that and we can retell that story in a way that opens up different possibilities for ourselves. That is a creative act, right? So fundamentally, I view storytelling as poetic. Right? Now, in health communication, the discipline where I teach, we've tended to privilege the written and spoken word. And I remember a journal article that came out, and Patty's like, there are so many words in here. Where are the images? Where are the other ways telling stories? Do you remember this conversation? I do. Yes. And it was before, right, we had electronic journals and had more access, so we were able to get 2 images into that journal article. But what's exciting for me, Hailey, is to think about how we have so many meaning-making resources at our disposal if we enlarge what we think about as a narrative. Right? So if we circle back to Caitlin's scrapbook, her story as shared with us, part of the power of that comes from the imagery that she's integrated and how she's integrated other people's images along with artifacts that she's found really powerful and the written word. So what I want to challenge myself and our students and all of us to do is to expand our understanding of the creative potential of storytelling. In some of the documentaries, we actually use something that's called video voice, where we turn over the means of production to participants, and we give them cameras, and we let them film what's important to them. And then we juxtapose their footage alongside our footage. And the challenging thing about that is that you have to let go of control, right? The beautiful thing about that is that you let go of control. And people are experts in their own right. They have so much to teach us. And our work is so much richer when we're guided by their hand, to use Ian's words. So even thinking about how part of the poetic nature of storytelling is the co-authored nature of it. And this might feel controversial to some people, but I don't think stories are owned. I think we can be gatekeepers of our stories, and we can share bits and pieces of our lives with others to the extent that we trust them and we trust their intent. But others will always enter into those. Right? You enter in, right, to Caitlin's story from your unique standpoint. I do. Right? And meaning resides not in the mind of one person, but in between people. Right? And in between people and material resources in their surround. And so fundamentally, that's very freeing. It's also scary. Right? Thank you for the question.
Can you talk, this is obviously very personal to you on a lot of different levels. Can you talk about how you have that personalized connection to all of this and are still acting as a researcher to tell a different type of story to other audiences?
Is he getting a t-shirt for that question?
was fine.
Hailey, you get a t-shirt. Thank you, Scott, for asking that question. I feel grateful to be in a profession where I can be reflexive about how my positionality as a person, a human being, a scholar, shapes the questions that I ask and the brave spaces that I seek out, and the things that are of importance. And that is not only shaped by my scholarly disciplinary training, it's shaped by my own life experiences. What most people don't know, and maybe even my daughter who's here, is that my dad and my stepmom, both now resting in peace, would tell me that they met me when I was 5 years old. And when they met me, they said that I was both malnourished and mute. And it wasn't until first grade where they actually sought help. I could read really well, but I wasn't talking. And that was in part a response to trauma in an environment. And it was ultimately Patty, an artist, maybe today they would be called an art therapist, who was able to draw me out of myself. And so by the 3rd and 4th grade, if you look at my report cards, they actually then said things like, she talks a lot, right? I went from not talking to talking a lot. But I think the circumstances that I grew up in fundamentally shaped my desire to be present and walk alongside to the extent that people were comfortable with people in really hard moments, and to be okay with that. And to know that there deserves space in the public sphere for all sorts of experiences and all sorts of voices to be elevated.
Really project, but I know it's to get on the... Hi. Am I projecting?
You're good, Amy.
Okay. Could you tell us Barbara's story anymore?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Barbara was a nurse by trade, but at her memorial service 2 weeks ago, I shared that I believed that she was a teacher at heart. She was a nurse and cared deeply about humanizing healthcare and expanding and shifting doctor-patient family communication. So when her and her then husband, Steve, endowed the professorship in health communication, it was with the intent of supporting engaged scholarship that involved students, but that focused on humanizing the way that we think about health, right? And with a knowledge that the way we talk about, write about, sing about, dance about bodies matters. It's consequential, right? And so she cared deeply about that. I also, I was gifted by her family, and this just came in the mail 2 days ago. I was gifted this heart from her family, and it was from her mother. And it came with a note that said, I hope you will continue to lead with your heart. And she supported that, right? She supported what Ruth Bahar would say, research that doesn't break your heart isn't worth doing. And that's not for everybody. And it's not always for me, right? But I also think that we must not turn away from righteous inequities and anger, but that we can do that from a place that amplifies assets and with a joyful heart. And we shared that, and now I'm wearing it. And I'm probably causing all sorts of havoc with the mic. Sorry, Kevin. She's an amazing woman. her family might be a part of the live stream. I'm not sure if they are.
Very fascinating, very broad experiences and work and projects. Do you have anything big on the horizon that you're looking forward to?
Oh, thank you. What is your name?
My name's Anne. Sorry.
Anne? Okay. Right now, we are, Megan and I are really immersed, along with a lot of people, in a multifaceted project with Sugarbush Foundation that also includes Passionworks. And at the heart of all of that work is trying to shift a broader narrative of southeastern Appalachia, Ohio, right? For me as a narrative scholar. The way that happens is in the form of parades with life-size puppets and hands that are 2 stories tall and whimsical, right? Happens in a lot of different forms. Happens through the Zero Waste Initiative, right? It happens through the True Pigments Project. It happens through the Chester Hill Produce Auction. But our goal is to try to capture in those diverse settings how they're trying to take a more global narrative of this region and illustrate its limits by really listening to the people on the ground who are doing work that are amplifying assets. And so it's keeping us busy, but it's beautiful work. And if you go to Passionworks YouTube and Sugarbush Foundation's YouTube and our YouTube, you can see short stories and follow our progress along the way.
I'd like to thank Lynn for the wonderful talk and just remind you we've got another Science Cafe on December the 7th, the one on the Green Roof Project. And if there are further questions from the audience, I think Lynn's going to be hanging around here for a few more minutes. But in the meantime, let's thank Lynn for a wonderful, inspiring talk.